De voir toutes les présentations cette semaine. Et maintenant, je vais parler anglais, désolé. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about some management in the U.S. And first of all, I'm from Vermont, the northeast part. And today in the talk, I am going to talk about some management in Vermont, along with management in the Great Lakes, in particular Lake Erie and Lake Huron. And also some work in Connecticut, and mention Minnesota and Wisconsin to orient you spatially. So I hope what you'll see today, it probably will look very familiar to what you do. Maybe there'll be some new things that maybe will be very interesting. So hopefully it will be informative, if not interesting, talk for you today. So to start, the lake management in the U.S. begins with the Clean Water Act from 1972. And this followed on from the very first law, federal law for water quality in 1948. The 1948 law provided funds, but really no direction. It was not very good. And during this time, in the 50s and 60s, we had a lot of really troubling environmental conditions. The Cuyahoga River on Lake Erie caught fire. The Potomac River in Washington, D.C. was so polluted it smelled all the time. This is a famous politician. And in California, there was a massive oil spill in the 60s. So water conditions were not great, and it brought out a lot of public attention, public support for clean water. And so that resulted in the Clean Water Act in 1972, which the law was vetoed by President Nixon, but Congress united and overruled the veto, and we probably won't ever see that ever again happen, where Congress is united. So this was a big landmark. So the Clean Water Act basically is trying to maintain the integrity and restore the integrity of water across the nation. For the first time in 1972, pollution was regulated, so you needed a permit to pollute by law. It also established water quality standards, and a lot of that had to do with the work of Schindler, establishing phosphorus as a key nutrient for eutrophication. And also the Clean Water Act provided a lot of funds to create new sewage treatment plants, and also recognized the issue of non-point source pollution. So the Environmental Protection Agency, a federal agency, is responsible for enacting the Clean Water Act and monitoring the lakes nations, and they have a large-scale assessment every 5 years for the whole country, and they're basically trying to monitor the stressors and the extent of degradation in the health of lakes across the country, and also the trends. The survey is probability-based, based on stratified by these different ecoregions, and you can see the parameters of the size of the lakes that are included. And in the most recent one, in 2022, over 900 lakes were surveyed. Here they are, and at least around 100 lakes were sampled twice to look at the sampling variability over time within the year. So this should all look familiar. We monitor the same things: benthic invertebrates, chlorophyll, zooplankton, nutrients, chemistry. We do not. This program does not sample fish, so that's a difference. But we do sample zooplankton. And you can see all these other attributes that are measured, including cyanobacteria blooms and also bacteria. So the results from 2022 found that about 50% of the lakes were considered poor in terms of nutrients and primary production. So nitrogen and phosphorus, about 50% were considered poor, And also, in terms of primary productivity, about half the lakes were also considered in poor condition. Trends from 2017 to 2022 over the 5-year period. Not a lot of change in the nutrients and biological indicators, but there was a decrease in what was considered good shallow water habitat, and also an increase in lakeshore disturbance. And there was a large increase in the detection of cyanotoxins in the water, and also atrazine, which I think is prohibited in Europe, right? Yeah. Okay. So if you want to read more about this assessment, there's a paper by Amina Pollard in 2018 in the L&O Bulletin. Tells you more about the program. Okay, now the other big federal program is the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, which was a landmark piece of legislation between Canada and the US to manage the lakes. And you can see the size of the Great Lakes system compared to Europe, extending all the way out to the St. Lawrence River. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement started in 1972 along with the Clean Water Act, and it had similar reduced pollution, reduced phosphorus in detergents, and creating wastewater treatment plants for the Great Lakes region. And that was amended in 1978 for more persistent toxins, and also to look at an ecosystem approach. That was in the amendment. And then in 1987, it was also modified again to look at these areas of concerns, highly polluted areas, that there was funding to actually clean up these areas around the Great Lakes, and also to evaluating the progress of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement every 2 years. And then in the latest in 2012, the ecosystem approach was reaffirmed, and also looking at more persistent stressors facing the Great Lakes, including 2014, the city of Toledo lost their drinking water for several weeks in the summer because of cyanobacteria toxins. Okay, so the Great Lakes are monitored every year, spring and summer, with a massive effort by the EPA. And you can see 72 stations throughout the whole system. In the spring, they start in Lake Ontario, and they just go throughout the whole lakes, non-stop, sampling day and night for several weeks. And they're sampling nutrients, phytoplankton, and zooplankton. And they also sample native species mysis, which is an important piece of the food web, just during the night when the mysis migrate off the bottom. And they also sample benthic invertebrates. And so, although these lakes, Lake Superior is 82,000 square kilometers, the monitoring picks up trends, lake-wide trends in each of the lakes, and here's some data. So this is the western part of Lake Erie, very shallow, very eutrophic. You can see the increase in variability in total phosphorus over time from 1985 to the present day. This dashed line is the target threshold for total phosphorus in the western Lake Erie. And you can also see silica is also increasing over time. And we can compare that to, say, Lake Huron, where the scale is very different, go 12 instead of 100. And you can see that the total phosphorus is meeting the lake's threshold, and it's actually decreasing over time, and silica is increasing. So the monitoring program is capturing a lot of patterns, trends, and if we look at Lake Huron further, here is again the total phosphorus and silica. You can see a doubling of the Secchi depth over the last 2 decades, and also seeing a sharp drop in particularly filamentous diatoms dropped off here in the early 2000s and has remained low. So again, the monitoring program is also looking at zooplankton and benthic invertebrates. So if we look at the zooplankton, we can see this bottom-up effect going on where the zooplankton dropped out also, and particularly the Daphnia community just dropped out in early 2000s. and also benthic invertebrates. This is a diapria, very important food for lake whitefish, and that has dropped out also in the early 2000s. And this is all propagated up the food web to affect the fisheries. So in Lake Huron, this is lake whitefish. This is tens of millions of dollars fishery. And we can see that the population improved with the water quality improvement from the early 70s. And then in the last 2 decades, the population is dropping out, not just in Lake Huron, but throughout all the Great Lakes, except Lake Superior. And it's likely related, strongly related to quagga mussels. They are probably responsible for that decrease in total phosphorus and the decrease in the bottom-up effect. So this might be what Lake Geneva might be looking like in a couple of years, if not already. Okay, so that is a big scale picture of the nation and of the Great Lakes. But if we look at water quality at a more local scale, state agencies are responsible for water quality monitoring, but also other players are professionals, so environmental consultants also play a major role in monitoring and managing lakes. Scientists, our national funding agency, National Science Foundation, provides long-term programs for doing research, and it feeds into management. So the scientists are behind monitoring also and management. And then we have a big input from citizens in participating in lake monitoring and management. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next slides. One example is in Lake Champlain, where I work. You can see a volunteer from a routine monitoring program found the first sign, the first capture of the invasive golden clam, and again, volunteers and lake associations play critical roles in working with the state agencies to help manage the lakes. So as you've seen this week, there's lots of data available everywhere on the internet. You can probably find anything you want in terms of lake water quality. And so the question is, how do we take all this information and turn it into knowledge for making informed decisions? And what I want to do is to talk about Vermont, where I'm from. Switch over here. So Vermont is, again, in the Northeast, and it has more than 800 lakes from the western shoreline of Lake Champlain, which is about 1,200 square kilometers, and then the Connecticut River runs along the entire border of Vermont and New Hampshire and empties into the lake, into Long Island Sound near New York. Okay, so in Vermont, we have what's called a lake scorecard. And this is used to take data from monitoring programs and present it to the public on lake health, with the idea that the public, if they're knowledgeable, they'll feel they want to participate in lake management and help. So the basic question is, how is Lake X doing? And the program uses very simple graphics, which I'll show in more detail, to inform the public of how their lake is doing. And it's based on water quality trends, lakeshore disturbance, mercury, and also invasive species. And the idea is using the best available data along with professional judgment to generate an easy to read information for the public. And again, the idea is to encourage the public to get involved with lake management. And so this is one lake, an example, Lake Carmi, and it's near the Quebec border up here. And what we can see is the colors indicate the conditions. Blue is good, yellow is fair, and red is poor. And we can see that in water quality trend and mercury, it's not doing so good, and it's doing even worse in terms of lakeshore development and invasive species. The water quality standard's impaired, and it's highly disturbed, and the colors are translated into the watershed and to the lake. So if we click on, if you go to the website, you can click on water quality data, and you can see this is the spring total phosphorus measurements from a monitoring program by the state agency, and also the spring total phosphorus and chlorophyll A. And these are samples taken by citizens and brought to the state laboratory, and the state laboratory then processes them for phosphorus and chlorophyll. And so it's a very engaged program, and also you can see that the citizens are trained in how to measure Secchi depth also. So these metrics, these trends over time are used to inform the score for the water quality trend. You can also see here is the water quality threshold for phosphorus, and you can see the measurements are above it. So in terms of water quality standards, phosphorus is impaired, and also in this lake in particular, there's high bacteria. There's lots of up and down water fluctuations, and also there's poor dissolved oxygen. So you go to the website, you can see everything about your lake that you want. If we look at another metric, the shoreline disturbance condition, this is done using a lake disturbance index that the EPA program does. And so for this program, they randomly select a location along the shore with a 15 by 15 meter plot. Then 9 more stations equidistant across the lake are selected, and crews go and measure, look for all these different disturbances, record them. And additionally, they will also look next to and behind each of these sites, and then calculate a lake disturbance index, and that is what goes into the score for the lake. Additionally, you can click on the lake information, and that tells you about invasive species, and it will also tell you whether there is any warnings for eating fish. So in this case, children under 6 and pregnant women should not eat more than 4 meals a month of fish from this lake. Okay, so you can go to the website and you can find any of the 800 lakes in the state and see how they're doing. And then you can, if you're interested, they also have information on what you can do to engage with the lake, whether there's activities ongoing, if it's involved with the town or the county officials, the decision makers. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is an application on phones to help engage citizens with collecting data. It's called Lake Observer. This was created by members of Gestion a number of years ago. And again, it's to help people make observations on lakes and actually record the information and put it into a data portal. The data are uploaded into a site and saved under different projects that can be used for managing the lake or for research. And this whole app is part of a larger platform for crowdsourcing, for sharing information about lakes across the globe. It's been used both locally and nationally, and it can be used internationally. It's a free tool for anyone to use. You can download it from Google Play. And some examples in the state of Connecticut, they had a lake citizen monitoring program in the state that kind of just went downhill after time. And Lake Observer was used to revitalize that. So you can see that there's almost 13,000 observations recorded by citizens in 2023. The app can be personalized or customized, and that's happening now in the state of Minnesota here, which is called the Land of 10,000 Lakes. And I just want to point out, on the first day there was a talk about satellite and trying to ground truth satellite information. So I think this app is something that could be used with citizens to record data, and the application is customizable, so you can make it tailored to a program that you might want. Something similar is going to happen in the state of Wisconsin, next door to Minnesota. And then finally, the North American Lake Management Society does an annual Seki dip-in where they ask everyone across the country and in Canada to go out and measure Seki depths. And they use it to track water quality, and the Lake Observer is used for this project. So finally, just to end, to circle back to the National Lake Assessment, the EPA is working with Lake Observer to help ground truth data, or this happens every 5 years, so they're starting to use data from Lake Observer from citizens to look at patterns in relation to what the survey is on. So with that, thank you very much.